Now, there are three crimes in high-end photo inkjet printing that we've all committed over the years. The first crime is over adjustment when you're opening in RAW. So you're over adjusting the different controls when we're processing in RAW according to what we see on screen. Also, when we get into Photoshop or Lightroom or Photoshop Elements, we commit the same crime again. We often over adjust according to what we see on screen. The second crime that we've all made over the years, I certainly am guilty of this, is we're not using the full amount of resolution that our camera is capable of. We really ought to use all of the resolution that our camera is capable of. And we're going to go into that in some detail very shortly. And the last crime that we've all been guilty of is we're using equipment that is out of calibration. Either our computer screen is out of calibration or it's simply not good enough to convey accurate information to us. And the inkjet printer, we're out of calibration. We're either using a profile that's too old or a profile that's inappropriate to the materials that we're using. So we're going to cover that as well, and we're going to cover that in our last series of videos, which is process control and colour management. So we're going to go into that in some considerable detail. So let's get started. We'll go into the first point. We're going to cover the basics first of all. So the first thing we need to do is make sure our inkjet printer is accurate. Now, the only way, as far as I'm concerned, to check whether your printer is accurate is that you get a calibration print from your supplier. Now, most reputable inkjet suppliers will have an accurate calibration print that they can send you, and they'll also send you a JPEG or a TIFF that you can use to print this image out on your own printer. You put the two prints side by side, and if they match, that's fine, everything's okay. If they don't match, you simply get your printer custom profiled by your supplier. Now we provide free custom printer profiles for you when you buy our ink or paper for the life of the printer, and we'll also provide for you a free calibration image. All you've got to do is click on the link below and you can fill in the details, and we'll send you a calibration print and JPEG free of charge. So that's the first stage. Make sure that your printer is accurate with respect to a certified accurate calibration print. We go to the next subject, which is turning our attention to the monitor. Now, the monitor that we look at is not necessarily accurate, so we have to make it accurate. The first thing I would say is that you need to decide whether the screen is capable of being accurate. And the way I tend to do that is I tend to take a calibrated image and I put it on my monitor, and I see if I can adjust my monitor manually until it agrees visually to my calibration print. Now, if I can't adjust it manually, it's a pretty clear indication that my monitor is either too old or too low spec to be up to the job. But if you find that you can adjust your monitor manually to be a reasonable visual agreement, then you can get yourself a monitor calibrator like this one I show here, which I believe is it's a Color Monkey, and you just let the software do its job, and you'll be able to get your monitor to be reasonably accurate with respect to a print. Now let's have a look at our next little image. Now this shows an accurate monitor, but can you see the print is not accurately illuminated? So it's all very well having an accurate monitor, but we've got to have an illumination light for our prints that illuminate the print in a nice cold, I'd say 5,000 degrees Kelvin temperature. Very simply, you get yourself a desk light that doesn't appear to be yellow. It appears to have a nice white base, and it will illuminate that print correctly, and then you'll get a good agreement between your print and your image on screen. Now let's move forward to the next subject. We want to make sure that when we're opening our image, we want to open the image and view our image correctly. We really want to view our images on screen to a decent size. Now, what most people do, they tend to open up their image at too small a size. So what we need to do is we really need to make sure that on the bottom corner here, we'll go into this in detail in a minute, there's a little percentage scale on the corner. I like to look at that percentage scale at 100%. I like to look at 100% because I can then make sensible adjustments according to what I can really see on screen, rather than a miniature version. I'm not keen on miniature versions at all. We're going to use an image resolution calculator. Now this is a little sticker that we supply free of charge to you. You can apply for it by clicking a link underneath this video, and we'll send this to you. Now we do two different types. This calculator enables you to work out your correct image resolution according to the size of your camera. So you've got the different camera sizes here, and incidentally, you ignore the factor whether you've cropped the image down. So if you've started from a 36 megapixel camera, you've cropped it down to below 36 million pixels, don't worry, just use this particular row here, and then you go along the row, and if we're printing, let's say, an A4, you see that there, we're printing an A4, what we're going to do is we're going to set the image resolution to 600 because we want to use all of the genuine pixels. Now for our American cousins, we have a version of this for American sizes also. So do let us know whether you want a European version of this resolution calculator or a US version, and we'll send it to you straight away free of charge. Now let's get stuck into a little worked example. So we're in Photoshop Elements here. So what we do is we go File. What we got here? I think we got it ready to go. Where are we? So high-end color master image. Here we are. Now we're going to open in RAW. Now the first thing we need to do is to make sure the monitor, we're confident the monitor is accurate. If we're confident the monitor is accurate, we can start to do little things in RAW with care. Now, remember I told you about this, we don't want to see a miniature version of the image. I like to actually look at the image at a decent size. So I go into the center here, I press my space bar, and I can move my image down as I like. Now look at this, there we are. Now when I'm in RAW, I like to use very, very small, subtle changes, if at all. I'm very, very careful when I'm using white balance, when I'm using exposure. Certainly I stay well away from contrast. Probably the best advice I could possibly give you is before you do any more conversion in RAW, you submit yourself to an online training session. The best online trainer that I know is Ben Long over at lynda.com. If you look underneath our video, you'll see a nice little link to Ben's area of lynda.com. You can do a first month free trial and you can really immerse yourself in the best online training that I know of within lynda.com's library. So that's a really good tip for you. So basically, that's all we need to do as far as processing in RAW. Learn the essential skills, view your image at a decent size, and make sure before you start to change your settings that you are going to be working with an accurate screen. Let's go ahead and open the image. There we are. So there's our image. Same thing applies. We're in Photoshop Elements at the present time. I'm very keen on Elements. We've got all the different editing software available to us, but I like Elements. It's nice and simple. So we can change the actual size, and we can affect changes as we like. Same thing applies. Apply changes to within your image editing software very, very carefully. Remember that this image editing software that we have here, it can be very destructive. Often, the best possible image that you produce is an image that's come straight out of the camera, a little bit of work in Photoshop, or almost none. I used to train operators years ago simply to go crop levels print. So you'd crop out the image, apply a little bit of levels, and then go straight to print. Now, at this point, we have to prepare the image for print. So we're going to go to, let's have a look here. Let's go to the crop tool, and we're going to make a width of, let's say, we're going to make this into an A3 image. So an A3 image is going to be 297 millimeters wide by 420 millimeters high, and the pixels per inch that we're going to set. Now, how are we going to work this one out? Well, we go back to our calculator, and remember, we've stuck this little sticker on the side of our screen. So we've got a 36 megapixel. We've got a 36 megapixel image. I happen to know this because we've originated this from a Nikon D800. Tell you what, let's not just assume. Let's go back here and let's just check the size. So image size, what have we got? There we are. We have a full 36 megapixel image. So you see that that's all of the pixels that we've got. The standard recommendation that everybody gives you is just resize everything down to 300 pixels per inch. We don't agree with that. What we want to do is we want to retain as many of these genuine pixels as possible. So let's cancel that out and go back to our little calculator. So we're going to print an A3 image. Let's get a safe tool. So we've got an A3 image. We've got a 36 megapixel camera. It's telling us to size it up at 420 pixels per inch. So let's click back to our image here. We're going to go back to our crop. We've got 297 width, which is the width of an A3, 420 high, and we're going to go 420 pixels per inch. Now let's actually let's look at how we want to make this crop. So we'll pull that out a little bit. Here we go. Yeah, okay. I'll settle for that for the sake of speed, and we'll just check that our image is the right size. There we have it. Can you see the pixel count hasn't changed very much, and our size is okay for A3. And look at the resolution we've applied. We're using constrained proportions just to keep everything right, and we've got resample image ticked, and we've got bicubic interpolation. I tend to leave this on just in case we go a little bit off of resolution. The software looks after us quite nicely when we apply bicubic interpolation and we resample the image like that. But in actual fact, we at the moment, we've just taken control of our image. We've decided that we're working to 420 pixels per inch, and we've got the size. Now, once we've edited the image to our requirements, we're ready to print. Now, just before we go to print, I ought to mention that there's a few tools that I stay well clear of. I tend to stay well clear of brightness and contrast, and what I tend to like, so that's Control L, I quite like levels. If I'm changing things at all, I like to work with a histogram because it gives me fair warning when I'm blocking out and when I'm blowing out the highlights, I'm blocking in the shadows, and also where my midpoint is. I tend to work with these tools more than the very abrupt tools, which is brightness, contrast, that sort of thing. I'll also work with curves, but generally speaking, I'll try to work very, very subtly. I can remember Faye Godwin telling me years ago that image editing software is very, very destructive, and it's far better to apply very light, very, very small adjustments rather than just go in like a bull in a china shop. The other thing is a lot of people make the mistake of looking at the image on screen and assuming that because they're seeing a fairly soft image that they need to apply unsharp masks. They automatically tend to apply sharpening. Well, I would say don't do that. And I've always been advised, if I'm trying to pursue high-end photographic printing, that I should try to apply try to create a test print straight off. So that's do a print straight from the unadjusted image from the camera. That means in RAW, don't do any adjustments in RAW. Take it into Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever. Don't do any adjustments there beyond, let's say, a straightforward crop. You could do the crop, but then do the print and see what you're faced with. You'll probably be pleasantly surprised with your results. But having looked at the print, you can then say, well, do you know what? It's better than I thought it was going to be. I think all it actually needs is, let's say, a little bit of levels, a little bit of curves, slight changes, but you'll probably be pleasantly surprised that when you let the equipment do the work, you create, I think, a much more accurate reproduction of what you captured rather than an over-adjusted version of what you want. So we've got our image now. Let's say we're ready to print. So we go File, Print. Now we've got a lovely brand new P600. Now let's cancel that, and this particular system likes me to get rid of my other images. so that I don't go. Let's just get rid of these other images. Let's get rid of that, get rid of that, until all I've got left is my image to print. Okay, so that way we don't confuse our printer. So we're going to go to print. Here we go. We're going to select the correct printer. Now be careful not to have too many printers, particularly printers that we no longer have. I've still got a 3000, I've got a P600, I've got 2 laser printers that I do use, but beware, if you happen to have a printer driver, you might have 2 or more versions of a printer driver for the same printer. Now that's not a good thing. So delete any printer drivers that you don't need, and also delete any duplicate printer drivers that you may have on your system. So that's a good little tip. We're now going to go over to, in this case, more options, and we're going to go colour management. So what we're going to do is we go let Photoshop determine colours, and we're going to select the printer profile. So the printer profile we're going to select will be P600, and we're going to select the most recent printer profile. Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm using a machine that I haven't used for, let's have a look, for a good year or so. Now, can you see I'm committing a crime here? I've got a P600 satin profile, but look at the date on that profile. This profile needs remaking. It's a Marat profile, but if it was one of your profiles, we would name it to your name. And for the purposes of the demonstration, we're going to use this profile. But remember, that's a crime. We really ought to have an up-to-date printer, a custom printer profile used at this point, which would be something within the last 6 months. If it's over 6 months, I would definitely check that your profile is within date. I like to reprofile every month because we like to produce our work beautifully accurate all the time. But for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm using an older machine which has got an older profile. So forgive me for that crime that I've just committed. And look above here. Look at this crime. My image space is sRGB. Now, I never usually use sRGB. So that crime I'm going to commit for the purposes of this demonstration, but you should usually use Adobe RGB 1998. That's the image space that you ought to use. So for the purposes of printing, we're saying let Photoshop Elements manage colours. If you're in Lightroom, you'd say let Lightroom determine colours, and similar for Photoshop. So you let that, so you apply that decision. You make sure that the image space is correct, which is Adobe RGB 1998. You make sure you apply a printer profile that's correct. You click OK. Then what we're going to do is we go across the side here and hold on, we want A3. We want an A3 piece of paper. We're going to have the actual size, so that's fine, that's perfect. And we can go through to print now. So we go to print, and we've got a subsequent dialog box. That's our printer that we've selected. So make sure we select our printer correctly. And we've got a number of presets. Now I like to have presets. Now let's have a look at my preset for P600 satin. I've got a nice piece of A3 satin in my printer, and we're going to go straight down to make sure that the size is correct again. We're going to look now at where are we? We got to go. We need the absolute best quality we can get, no high speed, and then we press print. So that's basically what we have. We have to select the correct paper. So in this case, it's photo satin. We're going to have the highest possible resolution that we can apply. Now, in this particular printer driver, it only allows me to go best. Now, in a proper high-end printer driver, that would show something like 5760 dots per inch, and we would also have underneath there, it would say high speed on or high speed off. So in the case of a high-end printer driver, you'd select your paper type, you would select your resolution. I always select the highest resolution for production printing, and I'd have no high speed, and I'd save my preset at the back there. Now we're going to go into this particular area in great detail in our next video, so I'm not too worried about demonstrating this at the moment on a fairly lightweight printer driver. So we press print, and then that print goes off and is created. So what we can do is to sort of recap on what we've said, and I think I really ought to end this little presentation on going all the way back to the 3 crimes. Now, if we're trying to produce high-end colour photo inkjet printing, I think it can be easily summed up with these 3 warning messages. This is totally my opinion, and I can always be wrong, of course, and I welcome any feedback from you all. But basically, we don't want to over-adjust when we're processing in RAW, when we're adjusting in Photoshop, or adjusting in Lightroom, or whatever image editing software that we use. I've seen enormous quantities of very, very good images. They start out beautiful, but then they are slightly over-adjusted, and what a shame. We've just spoilt things at the last moment within the image editing software. So that's one crime. The next crime is not allowing every genuine camera pixel to come through to the printer driver. So use the spreadsheet that we provide in order to use every genuine camera pixel. You're going to get better tone, you're going to get better quality, better detail. In my opinion, you're going to get a better image in every respect in the detailed parts of your image. And finally, make sure you don't use out of calibration equipment, which basically means to say that make sure your computer screen is accurate and make sure your inkjet printer is accurate. Thank you very much for watching this presentation.